Welcome to NCURA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force is pleased to welcome you to the first of 6 webinars focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. This session is on unconscious biases, which are social stereotypes of certain groups of people that individuals from outside their own conscious awareness. I, Rashonda Harris, will be your speaker and your session facilitator. My career in research administration spans 20 years, with more than half spent in leadership. I'm a passionate volunteer within NCURA and am a founding member of the Task Force for Diversity and Inclusion. I'm currently an adjunct faculty member at Johns Hopkins University, teaching in the master's program on research administration. Today's guest speaker is Mr. Wayne Moody. Wayne is a certified dream coach and is an expert in supporting individuals and organizations to align passion and purpose with work. Mr. Moody's career spans over 30 years in the field. Today, Mr. Moody will share personal and professional experiences related to the impact of social constructs of race, privilege, microaggressions, power, and cultural humility. We are delighted to have attendees that are international and from all over the United States. We want this session to be interactive, so please type your questions by clicking into the question icon and participate in our polls throughout the program. We will be playing 2 videos for you during today's session. The first will be 1.5 minutes, and the second will be 6.5 minutes. With that, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Wayne Moody.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are today. I want to say it's a pleasure to serve here today. And as mentioned earlier, I am a Dream Builder Life Coach. And today, my intention is that we look in the mirror. I'm sure that's something that every one of us did this morning. We looked in the mirror. And you know, even as I would be at home getting ready for my day, if I look in the mirror and I see there is some shaving cream that I didn't remove, I would have to remove it. So today we're going to get a chance to look in the mirror. We will see ourselves for where we are. And I invite you to see this opportunity as one where I'm talking to you one-on-one. It's just you and I here today. And as we step into this process of looking at unconscious bias, we want to definitely take a look at ourselves and make adjustments that are needed that we can actually become better. So as mentioned earlier by Rashonda, we're going to be doing some poll questions, and I want the first questions actually coming up right now before we have our first video.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. So our first poll question is, do you think some groups of people, minorities, specific races, are more likely to commit a crime? Please make your selection. And we have quite a large number of attendees, so we want to give you some time to complete the question. We'll be given a few more seconds. All right. All right, there we go. All right, so this is very interesting, and followed by this poll, we would like to launch our first video. Again, as mentioned, this video will span 1.5 minutes.
We're just having a little freezing with our video right now. Bear with us for just a moment, please.
Is going public after posting video on Instagram of what he says shows an erratic woman going after his 14-year-old son, claiming the teen had stolen her phone.
This is my phone.
Show me. No.
You don't have to explain nothing to her.
Take the case off. That's mine. Literally, get it back, please.
Are you kidding me? You feel like there's only one iPhone made in the world?
No. Okay.
The confrontation happening in the lobby of the Arlo Hotel in downtown New York, where the Grammy Award-winning artist claims the hotel manager sided with the unidentified woman, asking the teen to show her his phone.
Find my iPhone.
Hey, I'm trying to help, man. No, but you're not helping.
I am.
What you're being is disrespectful.
No, I'm trying to settle this situation.
My son has nothing to do with her.
No.
I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the lobby.
Harold alleges that she scratched him and tackled his son.
No, I'm not letting him walk away with my phone.
Better get on somewhere, lady.
At one point, the woman is seen on the ground. It's not clear if she was pushed or fell.
No, please get my phone back. I cannot not have my phone.
Listen, get your ass on.
A representative from Arlo Hotel says that they reached out to the family directly and in a statement say more could have been done to de-escalate the dispute. We want to apologize to Mr. Harold and his son for this inexcusable experience. And what we are being told is that the hotel told Harold that an Uber driver returned the woman's phone later on. Harold posting on Instagram most recently that he wants everyone to follow the golden rule. The NYPD is investigating. TJ?
Okay. What if this was your child? How would you have felt if someone actually perceived you guilty of a crime that you actually have not committed? What do you think this is going to be impacting on this child? So why does this topic matters? Understanding unconscious bias. You know, one of the things that is so important is as we work as a team, we want to make sure that we are inclusive. We want to make sure that every person feels a part of what is happening. And today, as we tap into this topic of unconscious bias, I definitely want us to look at what happens when we do express these stuff that are unconscious. Next slide, please. So reference to unconscious biases, right? We're talking about judgments that are actually made against an individual or person. And normally it's from different groups. You know, certain people are perceived a certain way and how people are treated in a certain way. And this is as a result of the thinking. So with that, I want to share with you a concept reference to how our mind works. Next slide, please. So the reason why we need to look at this is because if we want to improve, if we want to make a difference, if we want to achieve as much as we can, that's why there is need for mitigation. Because it's in order to look at where we might have a pitfall and how we can avoid those pitfalls. So that's the reason why we will look at this topic today. Next slide, please. So here I want to share with you some information on the mind. Now, the mind is different from the brain. The brain is actually the organ that is actually in the head, which, as far as the brain is concerned, an individual can actually be brain dead. But as far as the mind is concerned, it's that capacity, it's that part of our being that is not tangible. Now, the way the mind works, the mind is the capacity that we have to make the choices that we make. And the choices that we make actually is a part of creating the life that we live. And it is also with the mind that we actually tap into the next part of our being as far as using our imagination or will. And our mind is actually the thing that actually stimulates the brain. Next slide, please. So this is a concept that I want you to definitely resonate with you. TARE. The T refers to the thoughts that we think, which the mind actually is a room from where thoughts are actually coming from. The emotions are connected to the thoughts that we think. The actions that we actually participate in will give us the results. So when it comes to the results that we're seeing, it is as a result of the way that we're thinking. You know, when the session was planned, we didn't know what happened yesterday was going to happen, reference to what happened at the Capitol in DC. But think about it. The thinking led to the feelings, which led to the actions, which has given us the results that we actually are looking at today, as far as looking at yesterday. And I'm sure nobody is actually oblivious to the situation that happened yesterday, but I want to let this point sink in with us, because it's important to understand that the unconscious biases come as a result of the thoughts that people are thinking. Now, there are two aspects of the consciousness, as far as the consciousness is actually that which we're observing in time, but the subconscious is the realm whereby all the memories are there, and it is from the subconscious most times that unconscious biases actually come from. Now look at what happens here with this acronym that I have. The thoughts: I might not feel good about myself, so what do? I begin feeling unhappy, which caused me to not take action, and therefore the result is seen. The thought, the feelings, the actions, and the result. We're going to come back with that, because this is something that is so important, reference to us truly looking at how do we actually operate and deal with unconscious biases, because it's all tied into the way of thinking, because our thinking is going to be shown in the way we actually have the results that we have in our lives. Next slide. The brain. So, warning, my thinking affects my results. And it is my thinking that causes me to come up with the views that I have of individuals, whether it's be a race or a sex or an age or whatever it is. But my thinking is connected to how I'm going to be feeling. My feeling is going to be connected to the actions that I take, and the results is going to be seen in what happens. And I want to show you this, how practical this is today, because today we are actually here because we have decided to be here. How did I decide to be here? Yes, I got an invitation. I thought about it. Thinking about it, I'm very excited, because this opportunity that I have to share brings some feelings and some emotions. And with the feelings, there are some actions that we're taking right now, which is going to give the results, which is at the end of the session, we will be able to look in the mirror, see what adjustments need to be made, and we can actually make a difference. Next slide. Race is something that is pivotal reference to unconscious biases. And this is only one aspect of where biases might come from, you know. And being someone that is from the Caribbean, I've experienced my own mindset as far as being here in the United States of America. I've lived here for over 17 years. And I must say that I did not know until I actually came to the United States of America that I was a minority. I was a minority. But I have refused to take on that identity, because that's what was said about me. So as far as race is concerned, minority, I will not claim that identity, because my thinking again is connected to how I'm going to feel about myself, how I'm going to act about myself, and what's going to be the results of my thinking is going to be seen in how I live my life. So race is something that is pivotal as we look at unconscious bias, because what is race? Next slide, please. As we know it, it has no determinist biological biases. All the same race is so powerful, and it is there are life or death consequences. You know, one of the things that I've realized is that as far as mankind is concerned, as far as being human beings, race is just what we claim it to be. One of the things that I want to highlight here at this point is the fact that blood type does not go with races. If someone actually, say, is in an accident and they're in need of blood, the person that shows up as far as the paramedics or in the hospital, they don't ask what race the person was. They ask what blood type the person has. And blood type does not dictate, that race does not really dictate the blood type that you have. And you know, when we see ourselves as a people that are one, therefore, as we look at the whole dynamics of how does the unconscious bias shows up in our race, that is something that I believe can help us to truly see each other for the way we really are. One people, one spirit, one being. Next slide.
Wayne, before we move to the next slide, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Since unconscious biases are often perceived to be specifically racially motivated, do you feel that there are actual biases within our internal groups?
Repeat that again for me, please.
Biases are often seen to just be racially applicable. Do you feel that there are biases that we have within our internal groups as well?
You're talking about the organization that has invited me here today?
No,
Or
I
just
mean
general?
myself as a Black woman. Do Black women have biases against other Black women?
Oh yeah.
And I'm just giving that as an example, not saying that, but my question.
Well, it was Henry Ford who says, as far as thinking is concerned, right? What he said, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're right. And the thinking is so, I mean, today, if there's anything I would like to resonate in us is that our thinking actually gives us our results. It's been tested and proven even through scientific data reference to the mind. The thinking is connected to actually the results that we experience in our lives. One of the fundamental dream building principles that I know is that everything is first a thought before it becomes a thing. I mean, this meeting, where was it conceived? In somebody's mind. The clothing we're wearing, those nice glasses that you're wearing, where was the concept conceived? In somebody's mind. And the thoughts, the energy was put into it. With the energy put into it, then we did the work, and then the outcome are those beautiful glasses. This meeting was conceived in the mind of the team, right? That thought led to the actions taken. We have some amazing feelings today as we're in this session, because honestly, this is what it's all about. We need to see the connection between our thinking, our feeling, the actions, and the result. So reference to where it's at. For example, whether we're talking about a LaQuisha or a Karen, because those are biases, or whether we're talking about someone's accent as far as what they're speaking, they come because of the mindset and the thinking. And one of the things that I realized, it is said that a child, for example, from birth until like 18 months is operating in what is called genius capacity. A child that is born and comes into this world is a blank slate. But that child learns from what that child hears, what that child sees, and the experiences that child has. Like each and every one of us here today, who we are is as a result of all the experiences we've had in life. And this is why, as we look at the unconscious biases, no matter where you're coming from, there are biases, but it's to be aware of them. And as we proceed, we're going to see how can we be effective in actually looking in the mirror, see what needs to be adjusted, and make the adjustments. Does that make?
It does make sense. And so, because we want to be interactive and engage the participants here, I want to jump into things that are very much present with what we're going through right now. And so I'm going to ask the obvious question. Do you think the recent elections have caused more biases? And if yes, in what way?
Well, like I said earlier, the results, all right, results actually came from the thinking. And there are thinking that we have that needs to be changed. The only way change can come, honestly, change begins when my thinking changes. That's where change begins. And what we see being displayed as far as the results that we have came from the thinking. So what we're seeing is just a result of the whole mindset that people actually have. And everyone today in this meeting has a mindset. There is a conscious mindset and there is a subconscious. Now, the thing is, the conscious mindset is that which I'm aware of in the present right now. But, the amazing thing is that we live more from the subconscious than the conscious. And the subconscious is every memory, that's a part of the subconscious is every memory we've had since we were actually born up until this point right today. And it is the subconscious where we just react. People say the things they say because of all the processing in their mind and the subconscious, and we have the results. So reference to where we are today and what we're seeing, not just in this country, but in the world, it is as a result of our thinking, because our thinking has us where we are today. And I think it was Einstein that said, the thinking that actually brought a problem cannot be the thinking that is actually going to give the solution of the problem. We have to think differently. Does that make sense there for you?
It does make sense. And so I know we have some questions, and I'm going to be speaking to the questions shortly. But with that being said, how can we separate the actual incidents of criminal behavior between racial groups from the percentage of people accused and convicted? And then also, can we separate socioeconomic status from racial groups to see if that is a compounding factor?
Well, you see, as beings, we're not just one-dimensional. We're multifaceted. And this is why understanding who we are is important. And a part of understanding who we are, we have to understand, like I said earlier, the mind is different from the brain. And what the mind does, in the mind is where we have the capacity to make choices. And the choices that we make are influenced by the subconscious. But we do have the capacity to make the choices, because I am responsible. I am responsible for everything that I do. I'm responsible for everything that I say. Even if I don't want to take the responsibility, I'm responsible. So the outcome, I must take responsibility for it. Now, if I choose not to take responsibility for it does not mean that I'm not responsible. So when it comes to the race, or when it comes to the sex, or when it comes to whatever area that we might have unconscious bias, it goes back to my thinking. Because as a man thinketh, so is he. And it is my thinking that has to change in order that change can actually come.
Okay, so thank you so much, Wayne. With that, we have, before we move on to our next slide, we have our next poll. All right, what do you think are the current biases America is dealing with right now? And so while we're taking the poll, I would like you guys to think about some of the things Wayne just shared and what we talked about in the recent elections, and separating the incidents from the criminal behavior. And, you know, those are different topics that are are very front and center in the recent video that we just shared. So, you know, as you are completing the polls, those are things to think about, because those are actual things that we've been dealing with, and they're not new. They've been something that has been a constant. And so as we go on, we will talk about if we feel that the pandemic has really heightened our sense of sensitivity or awareness. All right, and so here we go. Here are the poll results. And Wayne, would you like to talk about the poll results?
Sure. Honestly, I so agree, because I would say the same thing. And, you know, as far as the systemic racism, again, as we look in the mirror, as we look in our lives and look at ourselves, we want to be honest, because unless we realize where we are, we can't actually go to where we want to go. So, and if we deny where we are, then, hey, how can we choose to go where we need to go? So when it comes to the results that I see here, with systematic racism being 92%, police brutality 68%, who or what lives matter 69%, I think those resonate with me.
All right, I would agree as well. I think especially systematic racism, which was heavily campaigned upon. And so, you know, I would be completely in agreement with what I'm seeing here. And so with that, Wayne, would you like to go on to the next slide?
Sure. So, you know, one of the things, actually, a friend of mine asked me this morning, what do I think about the media and the part the media had actually played? When I say the media, it's all inclusive. every single media house, every single outlet, whether it was radio or TV, had a role to play. And as we look at these headlines here, you see where the racism is actually seen as far as how a crime is covered that is by someone that is of color, or let's say a crime that is done by someone that is a Caucasian. The actual headlines is seen, and the media actually, I believe, is very much a part of the problem as well. Now, one of the things that I do know is, as far as the mind is concerned, we need to stand guard at the gate of our minds. And this is why what I see, what I hear, and the space that I put myself in is going to affect the way I think. But today, the media, the news media, the written media, their influences, and everyone has an agenda. I really believe everyone has an agenda. But this is why we need to come and start with ourselves. Start with me. Next slide.
Wayne, before we move on, we have a question. What can we do to stop systematic racism?
What can we do? Well, like I said earlier, we are looking in the mirror, right? I need to see what I'm actually seeing and be honest with what I'm seeing. As mentioned earlier, if I see there is a spot somewhere and I don't remove that spot, I will walk away and that is still there. So change begins with me. And where does change begins? Change begins with my thinking being changed. And a part of this, as we will see as we go on later, is truly being able to identify and see things from perspective of others, not to be judgmental, and to consciously look at what's happening and be honest. So change begins with me, and change begins with my mindset changing, because unless my mind changes, I won't change. I can get a new car, and if I don't change my thinking, it's just going to be a new car. I can get a new house, and if I don't change, it's just going to be a new house. I can get in a new relationship, and if my mind doesn't change, it's going to be the same me.
I would agree.
I have to change, and change begins when my mindset changes.
I would agree, and I wanted to add, with what we're looking at, the different headlines, I think it reminds all of us that really, changing something such as systematic racism is not something that happens overnight. It's something that we have to each play a part in, and being intentional in our efforts to be aware of where it is happening, and to take a step back to really be objective in what we're seeing and how things are happening. So if you are in any type of roles of leadership or mentorship or opportunity where others are coming, that is the opportunity you have personally to be intentional about your efforts, to be considerate, and to make the playing field even where possible. And so as we look over the next coming few days, we'll see the headlines change. And many of us are well aware that there has not been much talks of terrorism, domestic terrorism and things like that. But what we saw yesterday was very frightening to every American. And so, the headlines may not need to say what we all are feeling, but those are examples where this slide that we're looking at are applicable. And so, as Wayne mentioned, it starts within us, and it really means that we need to be intentional about our efforts and really aware and be mindful. And so, Wayne, with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. So we want to move on to microaggression. Now the question is, this is another poll question here.
Yes, it will be our next poll question. Do you think you have biases? And as we think about that, when you take the poll, let's be as honest and transparent with ourselves. This is completely anonymous. And we really want to be intentional about our efforts to really be aware and bring consciousness to our biases. And to do that, we need to be honest and transparent with ourselves. And so as you complete this poll, just be as, transparent as you possibly can. And this is a safe space. We're all here because we want to learn about this topic, and we want to improve upon it as best we can. All right.
Honesty.
I think we all, I mean, really, Wayne, this is something that I'm really happy to see, because I think I would be sad if somebody said no, if it was a majority of no, because in our own way, we all have some form of biases. I myself know I have biases. Um, but with that, how do we address our biases, Wayne? What do we start to do to really be aware of our biases?
Well, I think the results that we have is one way to start, acknowledging that we do have them. Now, I think what we want to be aware of is how do they show up? Because it's as far as being conscious that this is happening here, that's where I think we need to start, where we can actually identify it. Because if we don't identify it, then you can't really say make an effort to say have change. Because if you don't know there's a problem, then that is a problem. So you have to realize it. And like I said, from the results that were shown, we realized that, okay, this is something, and it shows that the topic that was chosen is right on the money.
And so, Wayne, what types of biases are most prevalent right now, would you say?
What type of biases? I think the whole idea of someone, and again, biases really come from stereotypes rather than actual knowledge. And think about it, because someone is, say, walking down the street with a hoodie does not make a person a thug. Or because someone, I saw a friend of mine sharing something on social media yesterday, and he deals with business, and he said the strange thing is that most of the people that come in for business, they don't look all dressed up and all fancy, and those are the people when they come in, their credit is good, they know exactly where they're going. But then you have people coming in and look all good and dressed up, and when they check their credit and where they're coming from, those are the people who they have problems. So because of where we are in our thinking, we can actually assume that because someone is all looking good, that they have it together, or vice versa. Because someone steps into a room and they're not all dressed up with all the name brand and all the expensive stuff, you might assume that, oh my God, they have a problem.
That's a great point. And so, Wayne, we have a question. How do you address people who don't have a changed mindset?
Well, as a life coach, this is one of the things that I know. I am not on a mission to change anybody's mind, because change cannot come until your will is engaged. So I say I meet people where they are, and I love them from there. And loving them from there sometimes is going to be from there, right over there, far away from where I'm at. Because change can only come when my mind is engaged in the process. So I have to purposefully decide, okay, I'm going to change. And that's why someone, for example, that is addicted, unless that person comes to the point where they decide, I am going to change. And you can, I mean, it might seem a strong comparison to add to an addict, but unless the addict realizes that I need to change, change won't come. So the question as far as how do we, the light bulb has to come on. And how the light bulb comes on is through discussions like we're having today, because the words actually can cause people to think. And then when they think, then the feelings can start being changing, and then the feelings change, and then the actions come, but the will has to be engaged. And you see, where there has not been the will is where things are going to remain the same. And unless, for example, as we look at what's happening today, unless we change our thinking, we will get the same results that we've been getting for all the years it has been.
I agree. And I think it's a great segue to move on to the next slide as I read our next question. And so, how can we communicate an approach to bring awareness to our colleagues, helping them to recognize the need to be more intentional with our efforts towards being more mindful of unconscious biases without causing friction?
Well, again, I know the organization that I'm actually serving today are organizations of professionals, right? These are people who do research. So as far as the information is concerned, everyone should have a level of awareness, whether it be defining the different types of biases, right? So the awareness is there, but then be conscious of when it is actually being displayed. Now, the thing is that because of the way it happens, a lot of times we do it and we're not even aware of it. And that's why we're talking about unconscious bias. And we need to listen, because unless we listen, and when I say listen, not just hearing it, listening means you are at the point where you're going to take action to respond to what the situation is. Because hearing and listening are two different things. I can hear you, but listening means I'm going to take action. And if there's anything that is needed to happen when we're finished this presentation, is we need to say, you know what, this is one thing that I can do differently. Whether it's be listening more, whether it be more inclusive, whether it be being non-judgmental, whether it be just pausing and pulling myself back and looking from the view of the other person that I'm dealing with.
Yeah, and to your point, being a research administrator, I would also say that it's a collective effort. You know, the approach needs to be one from the top down and reflecting what we're expecting. And that means to be respectful, mindful, and aware of the differences that we all may have. And so if we want to have, you know, intentionality with our efforts, that comes by the form of training and education that the department is having to have to show their commitment to the topic specifically. As you guys are probably well aware, there have been many efforts that have changed into you know, institutions having diversity and inclusion and equity, you know, leaders. However, it needs to be more than just lip service. And so the approach needs to be intentional with having opportunities for people to educate themselves, and also a committed collective effort so that it's not targeting anyone, so there's no friction, and everyone feels that they're getting the same information so that they can be more informed of making or battling and addressing their biases as we move forward. And so go ahead, Wayne.
Here reference to talking about leadership, because my philosophy of leadership is leadership by example. And unless I can't take you where I've not been. And I need to do the work in myself first in order that I can actually take you there. And this is why, like I said, the work that I do is taking people from the conception to the manifestation of what the dream is. And, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have a dream. And he had to see it first before he saw it. And reference to the inclusion and reference to the question is, can we see ourselves in a space where unconscious bias is minimal? It's not going to go away, because there's always going to be bias. But the idea is that, can we see it before we see it? And that's the place to start. But like I said, I can't take you where I've not been. So as far as the leadership is concerned, the leadership has to first start displaying it, and then it's going to be a trickle-down effect. Look at what has happened as far as our leadership in the country.
All right. And you make a great point, because we have a question that really plays into what you're talking about. It says, wouldn't your prior experience help to shape biases? If you have been subjected to continuous racism, wouldn't that have an impact?
Well, you know, like I said earlier, change begins with me. And, you know, how I stepped into this work as far as being a life coach, because, you know, when you meet someone, you meet the house. I say you meet the body. But when you start talking to someone, you realize who lives in the body. Because I'm traveling in this earth suit as a spiritual being. And I had to do a work like 2 years ago where I went into this computer system. I had to delete certain programs, and I had to download new programs. I had to put in the antivirus, which is getting rid of the mindsets and thinkings that I had before. And mindfulness is so important, and it's a work. It's a work to change my thinking, but it has to be intentional. And like I said, unless my thinking changes, my results are not going to be different.
All right, great feedback, Wayne. We have 2 more questions, and I think these both questions feed into our topics at hand. And the first one is, what is the halo effect? And the second one is, what is an example of confirmation biases? And so I know I have a couple examples that I could think of right away, but I'm sure you do too.
Well, you know what? As far as the halo effect is where you see someone to be something that is maybe appealing to you, and you give them like a pass.
Correct. I think for me, the example that comes to mind is the whole election. You know, both candidates are romanticized and could be perceived to have a halo effect, because you romanticize them to be all that you want them to be. You know, making often bypassing the flaws that they may have because you're, you're looking for the ideals that you want to see. And I think that's also similar to the confirmation bias,
Right.
where
They're tied in because it's what you want. That's what I want to be like. So I want to be like that person so I can choose that person. And it is seen when we're hiring people in the midst of the interviews, because if someone says something that resonates with you and that's where you're coming from, that's the person that you're going to want to choose to say, give the job.
absolutely. And I think this is a great way to talk about how you can deal with these different biases when we go to the next slide.
Right. And here's another acronym, FLEX. And again, it starts with ourselves, focusing within, truly being in tune with the way I'm feeling and being honest with how I'm feeling. Because if I hear something and it causes me to feel a certain way, then I need to realize that that is a bias. It's like the term, the Karen or the LaQuisha. We hear the name and it says something. You hear Karen and you think, oh, that must be a Caucasian person. You hear LaQuisha, oh, you think of a girl with her earrings and she's just ready to just fight. But you have to acknowledge that that is what comes up in me when I hear the name. So I have to go within. I have to recognize how my own experience has shaped me to having the feelings that I'm having. And as far as learning about others, one of the things that it is good to do is even before you interview someone, don't even look at the name of the person when they get the resume. Imagine getting the resume and not look at the name of the person, or having the name of the person not being given to those who are going to be interviewing the person. And you see the person for who they are rather than just say the race that they're coming from. And as far as the engaging in dialogue, it's important that we communicate. It's important that we ask open-ended questions in order to understand and listen rather than being in a debate. And as far as brainstorming possible options and solutions, we need to, like you said, be inclusive, because this is what NCURA is all about, being inclusive. So we focus within, we learn about others, we engage in appropriate dialogue, and then we expand our options. So we want to be inclusive. We don't want to be putting people on the edges because of whatever preconceived ideas we have about them.
Next slide. And so, Wayne, as we talk about microaggressions, I actually want to go to the next slide again, because this is something I think we all can relate to. Next slide, please.
So this is where it refers to stuff that happens on an everyday basis. And again, it is subconscious. Whether it's the type of hair someone has, right? I remember when I first moved again to the States, using myself as an example, my head was shaved, right? And then I started growing my hair. And I had my African-American friends, they were like, oh my God, you have good hair. I'm like, I didn't know it was good. I just know I have hair. And again, the hair says something, and it goes right across the board, even across cultures, because who is to say that my hair is good or not good?
Correct. And I think one of the things we've seen a lot, even in as we talk about reporting and we see things every day, are just different types of microaggressions. And so can we go to the next slide?
So here is where it comes in. Look at the example. Oh, you speak great, excellent English. And I know of some of my peers who they feel they go through stigmatization because they speak what we would say proper English. And that's even in the midst of our culture, especially African-American culture. If someone goes to school and they speak proper English, even amongst themselves, there is biases. And again, the same thing occurs even with other races, because someone, I remember I saw a video once with this Asian lady running, and when she was stopped by someone, the person asked her, where was she from? Where are you from? But hey, she's an American. She speaks English. But because of the race, she's seen as someone that is not from America. And those are subtle microaggressions.
Indeed, they are. And we have a question, Wayne. It says, I believe that some biases can result from life experiences, and some people are not willing to be honest and not willing to change. Do you agree? In a professional setting, do you think that there are more emphasis and attention should be given to an organizational culture to help shape the mindset of employees?
Well, what I want to say is where the world is heading today is inclusive, being inclusive. And for a lot of people, they prefer being in the past, reference to how things were in the past. But I mean, the world is changing. We're living in a global community. And therefore, there is need for that awareness to be in any organization that we're living today, because I mean, take, for example, today we're actually in a conference, in a webinar that is not just one nation or not even one race. So we have to be aware that there's an ongoing change going on, and it's just a reality. Now, some people are not ready for the change, but the change is inevitable.
I agree, and I do think that there needs to be emphasis placed on organizational culture to change it, and I think that is why some institutions and organizations, not some, many, are actually electing to create a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force to address this specifically. And with that, we have our next poll question. Have you experienced a microaggression? Then again, these are things that you may have, experienced throughout your day, and you are likely not to have paid much attention to. For example, the slide that Wayne mentioned, where we just talked about, you speak excellent English. Where are you from? All lives matter. You are so articulate, or you're well spoken, and different things, as Wayne also mentioned. You have good hair, or you're one of the good ones. Those are all forms of microaggression. So as you complete your poll, think about the things that you may have become a little desensitized to, but really are microaggressions. All right. Absolutely. And while we look at while we talk about the poll results, let's go to the next slide, because these are some microaggressions that many of us have faced daily. And Wayne, wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah, I mean, because I like the one at the bottom of the nurse, right? Can you find me a doctor? But I am the doctor. I mean, I am the doctor. But again, it comes because of the stereotypes that people embrace. Or man, you don't really talk like the average or person of color. But these are things that we're faced with on a daily basis. And in an organization, we have to be aware of it, and we have to change it. And again, change comes when we are aware of it and when we make the decision to do differently. Because unless we change our thinking, it's going to be continuing.
Great. And as we go to the next slide, we have a question, which is, why is Black Lives Matter not biased because it excludes other minorities or underrepresented groups?
You're asking me the question, why?
Yes, it's why is Black Lives Matter not biased because it excludes other minorities or underrepresented groups? And we have another one after that.
You say it is not biased. I think there are biases there. Because even in the midst of Black Lives Matter, right? Because I remember right after George Floyd's death, there was a trans, right, an African American trans, who was actually brutalized by some other African Americans. And Black Lives Matter, yes, all Black Lives matter. The gay, the straight, the bi, the old, the young. I mean, so even in the midst of, like we said earlier, there are biases in every group. And we looked at the survey we did earlier, reference to biases in what, no matter what it is, this is just where I'm coming from. There are biases in all groups. There are going to be biases.
Absolutely. And to also just round it out, Black Lives Matter is important at this time because these are the lives that are being impacted. When there is systematic oppression, other lives are not as impacted as others. For example, a great reference would be how we saw the Capitol steps under siege, whereas when Black Lives Matter was on the Capitol steps, they were very heavily guarded and could not be penetrated to have people actually going in and have the Senate running for cover. So those are differences why people fight for Black Lives Matter and why at this moment is front and center. And so I think while it may appear to be a bias, it's something that's more of a necessity because one group is actually being more affected than another. And so with that, we have another question. In the interest of time, I would like to go to the next slide and talk about this question, because I think this is a good way to address this question, which is, how do you differentiate between a potential microaggression and a compliment question to someone of a different culture or background?
Well, again, a part of anything is getting to know the individual that you're dealing with and being willing to acknowledge if I actually have slipped up. Because sometimes, like for example, since George Floyd's death, there have been genuine people who want to make a difference in what they know to be the norm. And when you look at what happened globally with other countries coming alongside and declaring what they're doing and they're feeling reference to what was happening in America, and some people just misstep and they misspeak. But I need to be honest. If you say something to me that I can identify as some kind of microaggression, I need to let you know, hey, this is how I feel about what you're saying. Because in the interest of truly supporting people who want to make a difference, because I need to be open if I'm going to be the as it were, the person in which the microaggression is being directed to. And if I'm the person that is actually taking it forward, I need to also be willing to say, you know what, I have missed it. You see, it's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street reference to us solving the problem. Everyone has to be involved. It's corporate. We need to work at this together.
Agreed. Maybe go to the next slide. As we go to the next slide, these are some of the ways that we can actually differentiate, because sometimes we are just simply not aware of the type of groups that have or feel targeted and the things that they commonly face. And so, informing ourselves and educating ourselves is the first way that we can really differentiate whether something will be perceived as a compliment or something will be perceived as offensive. And so this is just a snapshot of categories where you can see the difference. And if we may go to the next slide, I think this is the really one that makes us really sensitive. And so, as you may, Wayne made mention of, when he spoke about Black Lives Matter, it was, that there is a compound group of lives that are in there. It's not just one Black life, it's all different types of Black lives. And so being mindful, understanding that everybody has had different roads, that will help us to be able to be really able to pick out and think about what we say before we say it. And so as we go to the next slide, I think we just wanted to mention about, that Wayne has reiterated this over and over again, and I'll pass it back to you, Wayne.
So one of my life coach mentor, Mary Morrissey, who is actually the creator of Brave Thinking Institute, and she says information without application is entertainment. This was not an entertainment session today. I was not just giving information so you could feel differently, but unless we have application, there is going to be no transformation. So again, here we've looked in the mirror, certain things were brought to our attention, we're aware that action has to be taken, and if we leave the mirror not making the adjustments, it would have been futile. But I hope that having looked in the mirror, we can actually make the adjustments. And it's going to be a process, because it's not just going to be you wave a magic wand and it's all gone away. Where we are is as a result of everything that has happened. But we do have a future. And I usually like to use this illustration with my clients. Picture your life as a book, and you open the book. On the left-hand side are all the things that have ever happened, and you can't edit, you can't erase, you can't make it not have happened. But on the right-hand side are these blank pages, and you have the pen, and you can write what it is going to be from here on. But I have to make the choices to make it different.
Agreed. Great point, Wayne. And in the interest of time, we are so, this has been such an amazing topic that we have just blown through our time, but we would like to share the final video with you. So I'm going to ask that we launch it, and we will wrap up momentarily.
Thank you, and let's bring in now Keon Harrell Jr. and his parents, Keon Harrell Sr., Kat Rodriguez. Thank you all for being here, and also the attorney, Ben Crump. Good to see you all this morning, and Keon Jr., I have to start with you. This year now a few days removed from this incident. How are you doing, and how have the last few days been for you?
I mean, I've been all right, I guess. I mean, I've been confused. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if my dad wasn't there, honestly. But, you know, I'm feeling cool. These past few days, you know, still kind of shell-shocked, but I'm hanging in there.
Keon, you say you were shell-shocked, but what was going through your mind at the moment? We've all seen the video now, but you were living in that moment. What was going through your mind?
For me, I was confused because I've never seen that lady ever. And I didn't know what to do at the moment. So that's why I was happy to have my dad here to help me, you know.
And another question here, what do you think? Why do you think this woman accused you? Not just accused, but accused you so forcefully and then physically came after you? What possibly could have given her the impression that you had her phone?
I think it's because, for me, I think I was a threat to her, and I think she was scared. So that's why when she saw me, she just jumped on me and attacked me.
And let me bring in your dad here. You were there while this was happening. What did she physically do to your son?
She basically, I mean, if you've seen the video, we came downstairs and we hit the lobby and she was all on him, asking him for his phone immediately. But after the video cuts off, and I mean, she basically tackled, she scratched me. And I was there to, you know, try to protect my little cub the best way a parent could possibly do. And basically trying to keep her away, keep her off of my son. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if I wasn't there to be with him.
Mom, Kat, let me bring you in here. You had to hear about it and then see the video later. You weren't there. And parents' instinct, like Dad just said, is to protect your cub, to protect your child. What was that like for you to have to hear about that experience and to have to even watch that video later and not be able to be there?
For me, fear came in because my son, if his father wouldn't have been there, what would have happened to my son if the cops would have been called? So fear set in. As a mother, and when my son asked me, why me, son, that? Why me, Mom? That, it just hurt.
What's your answer to that question? Why me, Mom?
The toughest answer that a parent has to give their child, son, unfortunately, it might be because you're Black. It might be because you're no longer seen as a child. When you look at him, he looks like he could be 16 or 17, but when you hear him speak, he's a 14-year-old boy.
I want to bring Ben in here. Ben, you want charges. We've heard Keon Sr. there describe a physical assault. You want charges, and that's justice, but it's also in your mind are necessary because it needs to send a particular message. What message?
TJ, we want charges because we have to send the message because this has larger societal implications. Think about how many Black men have been falsely accused by these Karens, and they end up losing their liberty and losing their life sitting in prison. And so we have a petition for the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance Jr., to bring charges against this woman for assault and battery.
And Keon Jr., I know this is still fresh. This is just a few days ago. But if you do, and when you do, have an opportunity to speak to this woman, what would you say to her?
At first, I would expect an apology. And two, I would ask her why would she do something like this to a kid who has never met you at all, and I would just ask just why.
Your parents have both said something here, that they wonder what would have happened and they fear what would have happened if they weren't around. Was that type of thing in the back of your mind as you were having this experience, given all that we have seen this year in terms of videos and police interactions with black men? Was that in your mind as well, that type of fear for your life, even literally, Keon Jr.?
Yes, I think because if you're by yourself, right, and you have nobody to help you and you have no proof, and it was just me by myself, it would have been a whole different story.
And Kat, did I hear you kind of right that maybe are you waiting to hear her side of the story? Are you willing to give her the benefit of the doubt right now as well?
I am. Yes. I mean, I'm angry. I'm hurt, but I want to know why. The whole point is why. Why? We don't have any clue why this woman attacked our son. So why?
All right, Ben, Kat, Keon Jr., Keon Sr., thank you all so much. We'll talk to you again down the road, all right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So thank you all for staying and watching that video. Before we wrap up, we have one final poll, and the poll question is this: how do you feel about this video? After seeing the perspective of the young man and his family, how do you feel about this video? And even taking into consideration that some of us may know the other side of the story, or have heard the young woman's reason for why she did what she did. How do you feel about this video? All right, let's see what the results look like. All right, the results will be shared momentarily. Sad. And so Wayne, as you see the results, I'm going to ask that we go to the next slide, but I've handed over to you.
Yes, this is a journey that we're all on together. And we have to be the change that we desire to see. And a part of being the change, like I said earlier, is with my thinking changes. Because if my thinking does not change, then my results is going to be the same. And as someone said, insanity is actually doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So if we want to see change, we have to become the change. And a part of becoming the change is being able to realize that as human beings, we can look into ourselves. And this is why I need to know that I have the capacity to notice what I'm noticing. I have the capacity to acknowledge what am I thinking? Because the question that was asked, I mean, what was that lady thinking? What was she thinking when she went after that young child? And again, our thinking is as a result of the constructs that we've had experiences in life. But we have to change our thinking, because if we don't change our thinking 20, 30 years from today, we're going to be exactly where we are today.
And with that, thank you, Wayne, for an outstanding program. And we thank you, our NCURA community, for joining the first session of NCURA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force webinars focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hope you enjoyed today's program. Dates and topics for the 5 additional programs in 2021 will be announced shortly. Please be sure to complete the survey as we need your feedback. All survey respondents will be entered in to win one of 5 Dream Coach sessions with Wayne. Additionally, you can contact Wayne for group vision workshops via email. His contact information will be found on the evaluation. Thank you again, and we wish you a great afternoon.